and thank you for joining us today. My name is Peter Leamy, and I'll be your MC for today's press conference following the Supreme Court of Canada's ruling on the constitutionality of Canada's Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act. Bonjour, et merci d'être joint à nous aujourd'hui. Je m'appelle Peter Leamy et je serai votre maître de cérémonie pour le point de presse suivant la décision de la Cour suprême du Canada sur la constitutionnalité de la loi sur la tarification de la pollution causée par les gaz à effet de serre au Canada. Sans plus tarder, j'aimerais maintenant vous présenter le ministre de l'Environnement et du Changement climatique, l'honorable Jonathan Wilkinson. I would now like to introduce the Minister of Environment and Climate Change, the Honorable Jonathan Wilkinson.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Bonjour à tous. Thank you for joining me today. I am pleased to be joining you from beautiful North Vancouver, which is located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Squamish, the Musqueam, and the Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. This is an historic day for Canada and for our planet, for the economy, and for all Canadians for generations to come. Canadians rightly expect their governments to build an economy that fights climate change using the most effective tools at our disposal, and now we can get on with the job. Au cours des 5 dernières années, nous avons élaboré avec les Canadiens un plan climatique détaillé et nous l'avons mis en œuvre, en fait évaluer depuis. Our plan includes a price on the pollution causing climate change. It reduces pollution and returns the money to people's pockets in rebates. The plan also includes key regulations as well as almost $100 billion in direct investments. 10 years ago, most would have said that reaching a broadly supported consensus, aside from a small but vocal number of conservative politicians, on how to aggressively fight climate change would be impossible. Cependant, en décembre, lorsque le Premier ministre et moi avons présenté le plan climatique renforcé du Canada, le milieu des affaires, les écologistes, les syndicats et le milieu universitaire ont largement soutenu ce plan. Today's Supreme Court decision reaffirms that carbon pricing is integral to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and responding to the existential threat of climate change. As of today, the federal government can continue to use a price on pollution as one key element of its comprehensive climate plan because climate change impacts Canadians no matter where they live in this country. To quote from the ruling, climate change is real. It is caused by greenhouse gas emissions resulting from human activities, and it poses a grave threat to humanity's future. Et en plus, en résumé, la preuve démontre clairement que l'établissement de normes nationales minimales de tarification rigoureuses de gaz à effet de serre en vue de réduire les émissions de ces gaz présente un intérêt pour le Canada tout entier. Il s'agit d'une matière cruciale pour nous permettre de répondre à une menace existentielle à la vie humaine au Canada et dans le monde entier. En conséquence, elle franchit aisément l'étape de la question préliminaire et justifie d'être prise en considération comme possible matière d'intérêt national. And a final quote from the Supreme Court. Much of the reasoning in this decision turns on the evidence before the court with respect to greenhouse gas pricing itself. The critical value of greenhouse gas pricing as a tool for the mitigation of climate change, its nature as a distinct and limited regulatory mechanism, how it operates across the country, and the risk of carbon leakage. Pollution pricing is not what some members of the Conservative Party have tried to pretend it is. We have a made-in-Canada pollution pricing policy which includes rebates to ensure it is affordable for families. It is an essential part of any credible plan to address climate change in this country. While opponents have been going to court spending hard-earned tax dollars on lawyers, we have implemented the policy in real time, and we have seen that it truly works. Une quarantaine de pays et plus de 20 villes, États et nombreuses provinces utilisent déjà des mécanismes de tarification de carbone et d'autres prévoient les mettre en œuvre dans le futur. The majority of economists will tell you that pricing pollution is the most economically efficient way to reduce emissions while concurrently driving innovation. This decision will enable Canada to continue on a course that will create secure jobs for workers in every region of this country by building a prosperous 21st century low-carbon economy. Il est temps pour nous tous, quelle que soit notre affiliation politique, de nous atteler à la tâche de faire avancer les solutions climatiques que les Canadiens réclament et de saisir les opportunités qui en découlent. Some of our greatest accomplishments as a country, the things that matter in the daily lives of Canadians, came about when federal, provincial, and territorial governments worked together to forge solutions to complex problems. Medicare, the Canada Pension Plan, the National Child Benefit. I have been in ongoing communications with the provinces and territories and will be reaching out again about how we can move forward in a renewed spirit of common purpose. I don't want to be overly partisan today, but I will say this. There should be no debate in this country about whether climate change is real, whether it has an economic cost or presents an economic opportunity. Canadians know what's needed. They deserve to know what's on offer. We've outlined a detailed plan, and Erin O'Toole's Conservatives are offering a big question mark, or perhaps better said, a big magic black box, yet again. Erin O'Toole's vague statements on climate are eerily similar to those offered in climate plans by Andrew Scheer and Stephen Harper. Erin O'Toole says he cares, but he has no plan, and his party says they won't support him even if he comes up with one. In fact, his party can't even bring itself to agree with what the Supreme Court has again acknowledged today, that climate change is real. As someone who comes from the business community, I would offer that the need for certainty is a critical part of getting the investment conditions right for a successful economy post-pandemic. Today's decision provides that certainty. Bien que certains ne soient pas d'accord avec la nécessité de s'assurer que polluer ne soit pas gratuit dans ce pays, il y a des domaines sur lesquels nous devrions pouvoir nous entendre. L'un d'entre eux étant le besoin urgent de construire une économie prospère qui crée des emplois pour les travailleurs. Les Canadiens comprennent que cela ne se produira pas sans une action climatique forte. Moving to a cleaner economy is the single largest job creation opportunity in modern Canadian history. Today's decision means that we can get on with building a cleaner economy that will grow stronger and faster and create many more good jobs for Canadians. I certainly want to extend my sincere thanks to the multiple interveners in this case who stood up in court to defend the use of the price on pollution as a necessary tool in the fight against climate change. Among those interveners were several major Canadian cities, Vancouver among them. My deep thanks to Vancouver Mayor Kennedy Stewart for joining us this morning to share why Vancouver stood up to defend a price on carbon pollution. Mayor Stewart.
Thank you very much for having me here today, Minister. It's a great pleasure. I also want to acknowledge I'm speaking to you from the unceded traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And on a day like today, this acknowledgement means more than ever because of how hard we have all worked together to protect these lands that Indigenous people have cared for thousands of years. So thank you, Minister Wilkinson, for having me here today. Leadership matters, and that's what today is all about. So thank you for your leadership. And thank you as well to Dr. Melissa Lem for joining us and for all the work the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment have done to make our country more healthy and sustainable. The decision by the Supreme Court of Canada is an affirmation of the approach we have taken in Vancouver for many years, that no matter who you are, where you live, we all have a role to play in curbing emissions and dealing with the climate emergency. Climate change is real, and it doesn't respect borders. The action we take here in Vancouver has an impact on the entire world. That is why the City of Vancouver not only supports the federal carbon tax, but relies on it to meet our climate targets. And that is why our city has participated with a number of other Canadian cities in informing this legal challenge, specifically by explaining how important a carbon tax is to our work. Vancouver's economy has been thriving, and Vancouver's green reputation, aided by a progressive carbon tax, is a part of this. And now, it also needs to be part of how our entire country moves forward. The science is clear, the opinion of Canadians is clear, and now our Supreme Court has made it clear. The time has come to move forward together. National cooperation will help us unlock new ideas and tackle shared challenges. It will unleash innovation and opportunity, and most importantly, it sends a signal to our children that we are all serious about this fight. If the past year has taught us anything, it's that Canada is stronger when we come together and work to solve problems as one. So this is a day that brings me so much hope and so much excitement because I can't wait to see what we can accomplish together. Thanks again for having me here today.
Thank you.
Mayor Stewart.
Thank you very much, Mayor Stewart. Pollution unquestionably affects both the planet's health and human health, and that is why the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment was also among the interveners in this case. My thanks to President-elect Dr. Melissa Lem for also joining us here this morning. Dr. Lem.
Good morning, everyone. Bonjour à tous. I'm also speaking to you from the unceded traditional and ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. The World Health Organization has called climate change the greatest threat to human health of the 21st century. Today, the Supreme Court of Canada made a historic ruling that putting a price on carbon pollution is a legal way for the federal government to fight this threat. I want to express my gratitude for this decision on behalf of the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment and the coalition of families and health professionals brought together by Generation Squeeze, who intervened on this case with West Coast Environmental Law in 2018. As a doctor who has worked in cities and towns across Canada, I've met so many people whose lives and health are threatened by climate change. On the West Coast, where I live, smoke from record-breaking wildfires in the US choked our air last summer, spiking rates of asthma exacerbations, anxiety, and depression in my practice. Other Canadians who have suffered from flooded homes, drought, heat waves, and Lyme disease where it didn't exist before also know the climate crisis in a deeply personal way. Climate change is not a partisan issue. It's a diagnosis we all share, and carbon pricing is an essential part of the treatment. Over 3,500 economists and 27 Nobel Prize winners have called it the single most effective policy tool to manage the climate emergency. So advocating for a price on pollution puts us on the right side of history. And the good news is that taking measures to reduce greenhouse gas emissions also reduces deaths from air pollution. As of March 23rd, almost 23,000 Canadians had died from COVID-19. But just this month, a Health Canada study showed that over 15,000 Canadians die every year from air pollution. So when we clear the air, we save lives. And we're not saying that putting a price on greenhouse gas pollution is the answer to everything. Setting bold, accountable short-term carbon targets, phasing out fossil fuel development, protecting our old-growth forests, upholding the rights of Indigenous peoples, and making sure we have good, clean jobs ready for oil and gas workers are all essential to a healthy recovery. Our path forward needs to be green and just, and it needs to start now. As a physician and as a mother, I have walked with you and your families this past difficult year, and I want to return to normal too. But today marks our chance to create a new normal where everyone in this country works together against climate change. I am proud of the work that Canada has done to enact a national price on carbon, and I am proud of the work we have done to support it. So let's be brave and let's continue to save lives together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lem. In closing, I would just like to reach out to emphasize that we remain committed to working with all jurisdictions and with all sectors of the economy to build an economy that will fight climate change. Avec une approche coordonnée en place, nous sommes en mesure de parler au monde avec confiance et fierté d'une action climatique réelle, de croissance économique et d'un avenir plus prometteur, un avenir qui me préoccupe beaucoup en tant que parent de deux filles. If we have learned one thing from the pandemic, it is that we are stronger when we work together. Climate change is an emergency that we cannot ignore. By taking a Team Canada approach, as we've done during COVID-19, we can and we will seize the opportunity to address the urgent necessity and the generational opportunity to create a cleaner, secure, and more prosperous future for generations to come. Today is an important step forward. It is an important victory for climate change, for climate action in this country, for climate action in this world, but it is a particular victory for young people, who are the ones who are desperate to see older generations, like those of us represented here today, take action to secure their future. So thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Minister Wilkinson and Mayor Stewart and Dr. Lim. That concludes the broadcast portion. Thank you all for attending. Merci tout le monde.
Thank you, Peter. Merci. We will now proceed to the QA portion. Nous allons maintenant poursuivre la période de questions et réponses. So please use the raise hand function if you have a question. We ask that you keep to one question and one follow-up. And to use the commands on your phone, if you're dialing in, you can use *6 to toggle mute, unmute, and *9 to raise your hand. Donc, veuillez utiliser la fonction « Lever la main » si vous avez une question. Nous vous demandons de vous tenir à une question et à une suivie. Les contrôles suivants peuvent être entrés via les touches de clavier de votre téléphone. Étoile 6 pour couper et rétablir le son. Étoile 9 pour lever la main. All right, so our first question comes from Mia Rabson from the Canadian Press. Go ahead, Mia.
Yes, good morning. I'm just wondering, Minister Wilkinson, if you could walk us through how you plan to proceed. You said you would reach out to provinces. Is there anything that you will be changing as a result of this? And what kind of outreach do you plan to make to the provinces who have not been on board a carbon price at this point?
Well, I think we've been very clear that a price on pollution is part of any comprehensive plan that will address climate change in a significant and substantive way in this country. That was part of the plan that the Prime Minister and I announced in December. Part of that plan was, though, consultation with provinces about how we can work together to enhance the level of ambition that exists within this country as we move forward to COP26 later this year. And certainly one of the issues that we have been discussing with the provinces is how we can strengthen the benchmark associated with carbon pricing to ensure that it is actually capturing the appropriate megatons that we need to in the context of meeting our targets. We are certainly open to discussion, but I would say that I think today the issue around whether carbon pricing forms part of Canada's plan with respect to reducing emissions is over. We will be moving forward with a carbon price. And of course, we want to do that in a way that is that fits within the context of the Canadian Federation, as the Supreme Court said, our plan does. So I look forward to having those conversations with all of my counterparts as to how we actually do that in an effective way, but also how we can do more by working together. As I say, we have to enhance our level of ambition. The targets that have been committed to under the Paris Agreement are not sufficient to keep the global rise in average temperature to less than 2 degrees and ideally to 1.5. And so we will be having lots of conversations about a range of issues about how we can work together to enhance that ambition.
And do you have a follow-up, Mia?
Yeah, I'm also wondering, a couple of years ago, the department put out an analysis of how much they expected the carbon price to impact emissions, but you have since also sort of expanded how long the carbon price is going to be in place for and how that it's going to rise. Just wondering if there's any updated analysis of the impact it has had so far and whether what the impact is going to be going forward.
Well, we certainly, report the greenhouse gas emissions inventory to the United Nations every year, and the department does put out analysis with respect to where we're at on a number of the initiatives that exist under the plan. As we've said, both the price on pollution, but also the clean fuel standard, which is another important regulatory mechanism in our plan, are critical to being able to reduce emissions. Some of the investments are about actually accelerating the work that will be done through pricing pollution and through the clean fuel standard. And again, we will continue to be reporting, and we will be probably reporting in even greater detail going forward once Bill C-12, the Accountability Act, moves through the Parliament.
Thank you. Our next question va venir de Christian Noël. Allez-y, Christian.
Bonjour, M. Wilkinson. Bonjour à tous. Merci de prendre nos questions. Le jugement de la Cour suprême est accueilli par certains comme étant, oui, les changements climatiques existent, oui, la tarification carbone est légale, mais c'est encore une mauvaise politique, selon certains, qui fait mal aux Canadiens, aux entreprises. Vous allez faire quoi pour les convaincre, ces gens-là et les provinces, que c'est encore la bonne façon de faire?
Well, je crois que la Cour suprême a dit que, bien sûr, c'est constitutionnel. Bien sûr, c'est un outil important pour réduire les gaz à effet de serre. Bien sûr, il y a les premiers ministres dans quelques provinces qui ne sont pas d'accord avec le prix sur la pollution. Et bien sûr, nous devons avoir beaucoup de conversations à l'avenir. Mais je veux dire que dans la campagne électorale de 2019, plus de 2 tiers Canadiens ont voté pour les partis politiques qui ont dit qu'on doit avoir un plan fort pour combattre le changement climatique. Et une partie de ce plan, c'est un prix sur la pollution. Et je crois que de plus en plus, les Canadiens savent que nous devons prendre l'action, et une chose qui est importante et efficace, qui assister avec l'innovation et une économie forte à l'avenir, c'est un prix sur la pollution.
Et avez-vous une suivi, Christian?
Oui, merci. Pour rebâtir les ponts avec les provinces, pour travailler avec elles à l'avenir, vous allez leur proposer quoi?
Well, nous avons annoncé un plan climatique, plan renforcé climatique en décembre. Et après ça, j'ai eu les conversations avec tous mes collègues dans toutes les provinces et les territoires du Canada. Et il y a les conversations entre les fonctionnaires de tous les provinces et les territoires avec le gouvernement fédéral maintenant pour savoir comment nous pouvons travailler ensemble pour avoir plus d'ambition climatique. Et bien sûr, je vais avoir les conversations avec mes collègues dans les prochaines semaines avant le sommet de Terre aux États-Unis en avril, où nous avons dit que nous allons avoir une nouvelle cible pour réduire les gaz à effet de serre au Canada.
Thank you, Minister. Our next question will come from Maura Forrest.
Yes, thank you. Minister, do you expect that the provinces that have thus far refused to put their own prices on carbon will turn around now and impose their own carbon tax or cap and trade systems?
Well, I mean, that's difficult for me to say, and it's probably a question best directed to some of those provincial governments, but I certainly would hope that would be the case. You know, the way in which we've implemented the price on pollution is flexible. It allows provinces to be able to put in place systems that they believe more fully reflect their local economies and some of their local priorities. And certainly, we would be looking to try to move forward with all of those provinces in a manner that enables them to take the kind of climate action that all of the governments need to take. So those are conversations we will be having going forward. I assume that the provinces that have opposed the federal government and that have taken the federal government to court on this issue over the course of the past couple of years will need to spend some time reflecting on their next, where they will go from here in terms of policy, climate policy. But let's be clear, I mean, Canadians across this country understand the reality of climate change. They understand the urgency of addressing this issue. And I think that provincial governments increasingly are becoming aware that they need to respond to the views and the interests of their citizens. And we're seeing that in even these some of the recalcitrant jurisdictions on the pricing issue.
Thanks. And did you have a follow-up, Maura?
Yes, thank you. You talked about the new target you're coming up with for the April summit. I mean, you've said that you need provincial collaboration in order to make Canada's target as ambitious as you can. What evidence do you have that the provinces will be more likely to want to collaborate with you now, given that the majority were not with you on this Supreme Court case?
Well, I mean, there are a number of provincial jurisdictions in this country that have been leaders on climate action. Let's remember that during the period when Stephen Harper was Prime Minister and the federal government in Canada did nothing to address climate change, British Columbia and Quebec led the way, both with respect to pricing, but also with respect to broader climate plans. There are many provinces who are desirous of finding ways to accelerate their action and looking for partnership from the federal government. There are some provinces where, the conversation around pricing has certainly been a challenge. But even in those jurisdictions, many of those governments have taken other actions to advance climate action. We're simply saying that it's important for Canada to play a constructive role internationally, to be part of the solution to what is a grave existential international issue. I think that Canadians across the country understand. I think workers across the country understand that. They're looking for us to ensure that we are addressing this issue in a manner that actually will promote the long-term economic interests of all Canadians. That means moving towards a lower carbon future. That means thinking about how our industries will thrive in that lower carbon future. And ultimately, I think that responsible governments across this country are going to recognize that they need to participate in that conversation. But I would also say that the federal government in its December climate plan was very clear. We looked at what the federal government could do to advance climate action. We are looking for the provinces to help us to enhance further that level of ambition, but certainly the federal government intends to proceed forward to address this issue.
Thank you. The next question will come from the West Block. Please identify your name and you can proceed. The West Block, do you have a question?
Sorry, it's Mike Couture from Global News. This is a generic computer that we use. Anyways, it's Mike from Global. I wanted to ask you, Minister, you said you want to collaborate with the provinces, but how willing are you to put a bit of water in your wine to make sure that this negotiation actually happens?
Well, one of the things that I think perhaps was not as widely reported on when we released the climate plan was the discussion around the need for us to be regionally sensitive and to have regional strategies. And so there are a number of different elements that are in that plan that really are focused on addressing regionally specific ways to advance climate action. So in the Atlantic provinces, the Atlantic Loop, and in terms of helping to progress with respect to electrification through the region. In Western Canada, issues around hydrogen and biofuels and the money that has actually been put there to try to incent the development of domestic industry that's going to help us to move away from carbon pollution. In Ontario, the funds that have been put into the Net Zero Accelerator to help us to think about how we actually move towards steel manufacturing that actually does not emit carbon and that produces virtually zero carbon steel. So there's lots of areas for conversation and productive discussion with provinces. That doesn't mean that we are going to in any way say that pricing is not part of this package. It is. Carbon pricing is the most efficient way to reduce emissions. It is bizarre to me, to be honest with you, that conservatives in this country are opposed to a market-based mechanism that is the most efficient way to reduce carbon pollution. If you said that to conservatives in Europe, they would think you were crazy. So, at the end of the day, we will be moving forward with a price on pollution. That is clear. We will be moving forward with other elements that were in the climate plan. But certainly we've structured that very much in a way to engage in constructive conversations with every region, every province, every territory in this country about how we can move forward together to strengthen local economies and to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And that's exactly the conversation I will be continuing to have with all of my colleagues.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, as a follow-up, you said at one point you didn't want to make this a partisan issue, but you have been throughout this press conference. So I'll ask you, what does this decision mean for the upcoming election, and how central do you think climate change will be for the election?
Well, what I would say is, with due respect, I would prefer this not to be a partisan issue, and I've been pretty clear about this since I've been appointed. Climate change shouldn't be a partisan issue. It should be an issue on which we all agree it's real, it's a pressing issue, that every political party in this country has a plan, a credible plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We may have different elements that are different in different plans, fair enough. But that should be the basis of the conversation that we have in Canada. That is how it works in the United Kingdom, that is how it works in France, that is how it works in Germany. But it doesn't work that way in Canada because we still have a major political organization in this country that doesn't even believe climate change is real, that doesn't have a plan, or in any way a credible plan to address it. I would love us to get to the point where this isn't part of the political debate, that this actually is an election that can be fought on other issues, because we all agree that we've got to address climate change. We're not there yet, and I hope that we will be someday soon.
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre. La prochaine question va venir de Marie Vestel, de Le Devoir. Allez-y, Marie.
Oui, bonjour, excusez, j'ai essayé d'allumer mon micro. Je veux juste revenir sur la première question de Mike, en fait. La Cour suprême vous donne la légitimité d'imposer un prix carbone maintenant aux provinces qui n'en ont pas, en fait de continuer. Mais si ces provinces-là veulent établir leur propre plan, est-ce que vous êtes prêt à leur accorder une période de grâce, un genre de délai de quelques années, disons, pour qu'ils amènent leur propre plan graduellement afin d'atteindre le même niveau que le fédéral? Est-ce que vous êtes prêt à leur permettre un plan graduel ou est-ce que vous allez exiger que les provinces qui souhaitent avoir leur propre plan, que ce plan-là soit équivalent au plan fédéral dès maintenant?
Oui, merci. Nous sommes complètement d'accord si les provinces et les territoires veulent avoir un plan soi-même, eux-mêmes. Et bien sûr, il doit atteindre le même niveau de le système fédéral. Et bien sûr, c'est possible que quelques provinces veulent mettre en place un nouveau plan après la décision de la Cour suprême. Mais bien sûr, il doit atteindre le même niveau. Nous avons un plan, tous les provinces et les territoires doivent avoir un plan qui a le même stringency, je ne sais pas le mot en français, désolé, mais bien sûr, il doit être le même pour réduire les gaz à effet de serre dans une manière qui est en accord avec notre plan climatique.
Avez-vous une suivi, Marie?
Oui, pardon. On dit un plan contraignant, Monsieur le ministre, juste pour vous aider.
Contraignant, OK, merci beaucoup.
mais donc, j'en comprends que ces plans-là provinciaux devront être aussi contraignants dès le jour 1 que le plan fédéral, c'est ça?
Oui, c'est ça. Et bien sûr, il y a beaucoup de provinces, et provinces particulièrement, dans lesquelles ça existe maintenant.
Merci.
Thank you. Just a reminder to use the raise hand function if you have a question. S'il vous plaît, utilisez la fonction de lever la main si vous avez une question. The next question comes from Olivia Stefanovic at CBC.
Good morning. Minister, are you going to be working with the reluctant provinces to deal with any concerns, to address any concerns they have to implement their own prices?
Absolutely. I mean, we're going to work with all of the provinces and territories, and there are certainly areas of common agreement in terms of climate action in all of them. But certainly we will try to work through any issues for provinces that are looking to implement their own plans going forward where the federal backstop exists. So absolutely. I mean, that's part of constructive federal-provincial dialogue, and certainly that's my intention.
And as a follow-up, Minister, in your remarks earlier, you took some shots at the federal Conservative Party and invoked some partisan language. Is this the right message to send to the provinces that are led by conservative-minded premiers that have been holdouts on carbon pricing? Because doesn't this fight against climate change demand a cooperative approach?
It absolutely does, and I think if you'll reflect on what I said that we do need to reach out and have productive conversations with the provinces and territories, and I'm optimistic that there will be opportunities to find ways to advance in collaboration, even with provinces where there have been differences of opinion on the pricing. What I also said, though, was that I think at the federal level, we need to move beyond a conversation about whether climate change is real, whether we need to have a credible plan, that we need to actually get to a post-climate consensus in this country in the same way that they have it in the United Kingdom and in Europe, in most European countries, where we actually are all focused on addressing the climate issue. And unfortunately in Canada, we don't have that right now. We need to have an opposition party in the Conservative Party that is serious about climate change. And I really hope that over the course of the coming years, we get there.
Thank you, Minister. As there are no further questions, this concludes today's media availability. Comme il n'y a plus de questions, ceci conclut le point de presse aujourd'hui. Thank you, Minister Wilkinson, Mayor Stewart, and Dr. Lem for your time. Merci à Monsieur le Ministre, Mayor Kennedy Stewart et Madame Lem pour votre temps. Merci beaucoup tout le monde.
Thank you.